Um, Let me just make sure everything works, Shahela. Hold on, let me share my screen, would be helpful. Okay. Now, can you see this? Oh, sorry, hang on one second.
Now we see your Zoom screen. There we
You,
go.
you can see that? Perfect. Okay.
Yep. Good.
So yeah, I previously before I was deputy director at the league, I was the development director. So I've been doing grant writing for 7 years and even did some work before that. I also serve on the board of a nonprofit that does prison work, so I do a lot of grant writing for them as well. So if at any point you have questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I also have my contact information at the end of the slide, and I'll make sure Shahela provides that to everyone. Feel free, reach out anytime. I've had plenty of applicants reach out, weeks after these kinds of trainings to help them with the process. So let's just discuss. So you already, submitted your letter of intents, and now you're invited to submit a full proposal. So I just figured I'd kind of go through some of the differences between those. Your letter of intent is more like your outline, right? You're trying to kind of sell this vision of a project to the funder, where the full proposal is where you're going to really, focus less on the narrative and really kind of hash out the details of what you're looking to do with your project. Um, so now that you've captured their attention, you want to convince them, two things. You want to, A, convince them to fund your work, and then how much are they going to fund? What's the investment? So this is really where you want to sell your idea, your vision, your experience. It's all about details. While a letter of intent is more broad, it kind of focuses on storytelling, why you're doing this work. This is where you really want to get, into the nitty-gritty of things. A good proposal should definitely highlight the need for your project in your community. That's where you can really, what makes you stand out? What problem in your community are you trying to solve? Definitely want to provide a historical context. What is the background of why there's an issue in the community that you're trying to address? Um, and it helps tell that story. And then highlighting environmental justice. I know this is something that came up at the last in-person training. EJ has certainly been under attack at the federal level. But when it comes down to more local projects, you definitely, you still want to be able to highlight some of that work. Um, you also want to definitely provide a timeline. How long is it going to take for this project to be completed? What are the impacts after you're done with your project? Where do you see the project in 5 years, even if the funding's only for a year? It really helps to be thinking long term. Funders really enjoy to see that. You always want to highlight partnerships. Funders love seeing that you're working with other nonprofits or other groups in the community. Maybe you're partnering with schools or something like that. Just really think outside the box. Who else can you bring in from your community to help support this project? And then, like I said, long-term sustainability projects, definitely want to be thinking about beyond the scope of your work and beyond the funding cycle. And then how are you going to, gauge success? What are the metrics that you are going to gauge whether or not your project was successful or how successful it was? And what does that mean for the funder's investment? And then one important thing, always make sure you answer the questions that are asked in the proposal. I know that kind of seems simple, but I've been perfectly guilty of it before by spending too much time with like the big vision and everything like that. And then I ultimately go back and I'm like, wait, I didn't actually fully, answer some of the questions that were asked. So make sure you have them all laid out. And I was reading through the proposal. It's all pretty straightforward, but if you ever have questions or need clarification on anything, Shahela and the rest of the staff are here to support that. And then it's always understand the reporting requirements. That goes with any time you're submitting a funding request to any funder. Make sure, some funders require quarterly reports. Some might just require one report at the end. Some have monthly. Just make sure you have a clear understanding of what's expected from you should you receive the funds. A good proposal should not be too wordy. Like I said, it can be very easy to get like mixed up in like the high level vision and narrative and things like that. But if you make it too wordy, a funder may not completely understand what you're exactly trying to do with their funding. You never want to overpromise. It's way better to undersell and then end up performing better or being able to accomplish more when you go back to report, rather than thinking that you have to like do every single thing and you're unable to deliver on that. You definitely don't want to be in that kind of situation. You definitely want to make sure you have all the required elements outlined in the proposal guidance document, whether it's attachments, tax forms, every funder is different on what they require. So make sure you have all of that. And make sure you have all of this stuff, well in advance of the deadline. I did put the deadline down, March 13th at 4 p.m. I promise you, a funder always knows if you waited till the last minute. I have read through plenty of grant proposals before where you're like, this is definitely rushed. So make sure you pace yourself, takes lots of time. You may have questions coming up that you never really want to ask a funder questions about the proposal on the deadline because they're super busy. They're getting a lot of, making sure everything's good to go. So just plan ahead. Um, when thinking about how much you should ask for, never be afraid to apply for the full amount, but make sure you have a budget that really supports that. Also make budgets scalable. When it comes time, a funder typically only has a maximum amount that they're, dividing up amongst different groups. If you can show like, hey, with $50,000, we're able to do A, B, and C, but for $100,000, we can do D, E, and F. And then maybe, they might end up compromising in somewhere in the middle, but make sure you have a budget that's scalable, and really not just contingent on one set amount. And like I said, highlight other partnerships, other sources of funding. Funders like to see that, they're not the only person or group that's invested in your work. Um, and explain exactly, even if you have other funding, why it's important that you need this particular set of funding. What makes it stick out? What's the need that you're unable to achieve right now that you can with this funding? As I mentioned, highlighting long-term impacts, always thinking, down the road, 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. What is, even if you're only being funded for 1 or 2 years, what's the long-term impact of that? And then it's always good to do research, find out, take a look. What were some of the other projects last year that were funded, and how does that relate to the group or sorry, the project that you're trying to do, your group? Where to begin? Obviously, you're on this training call, so that's a great first step. But yeah, just taking a look, read carefully through all of the different documents that Shahila has provided. Make sure your team, if there's anyone else on your team is all reading it, they might pick out, catch something that you miss. So it's always good to share with, your staff and your programmatic work. And it's really good to, I like to, even though I'm, a grant writer at my job, I love to share my grant proposals with the entire staff. They may be able to, uh, have some new idea or something like that you weren't thinking of. So definitely good to share it with as many folks as you can. And make sure, you set realistic expectations. Like I said, you don't want to overpromise. Make sure that your staff has the capabilities without being like burnt out or things like that to carry out this project, over the next year or two. Um, Also think about, your organization's strategic plan. Typically, I like to go back to my strategic plan every now and then just to be reminded, like, are we still on track with this? How does the strategic plan fit the views and goals of the funder? And then also, identify any supporting documents you may need. Like I said, sometimes tax forms need to come up. It's really depending on what the funder requires, but make sure you have all of that well in advance. And then start drafting. I like to start with like an outline. That's pretty simple. Share it with your team, and then really start, going through the nitty-gritty of the application, making sure all those questions are answered. You've stuck to, key themes. I know there's, the key themes on the next slide right here for this round of funding. And like I said, don't be afraid to highlight environmental justice. How does this support EJ communities? Even though that's a lot, under attack right now at the federal level, funders still want to see that commitment. It's still very, very important. And I
I'm
think the
so
fact that
sorry. I'm so
Yeah.
sorry to interrupt, Connor. I probably should
Sure.
have t touched base with you about this before, but unfortunately, because of the executive orders that came out in
Okay.
January 2025, and because we're still a federal grant, we did have to pivot EJ out of like,
Okay.
yeah, for out of this grant program's language. So I think those are some of my comments for some of you for the feedback that we can't mention EJ because it's still a federal grant, and
Okay.
we'd be in violation of the executive order, but there are strategic ways of just kind of reframing things as well.
Sure.
So yeah, I guess when we provide these slides, we could just take that part out and
Absolutely. Yeah. Scrap what I
sorry
said.
about that, Connor.
No, no problem. No problem.
I've been
Um,
using marginalized and distressed communities because
okay.
that's protected under the Clean Water Act. So still
Okay.
using that.
That's great to know. I appreciate you flagging that.
Yeah, no
It's
worries.
always hard to keep up what's under
It
attack these
is.
days. I just like I'm
And
sorry.
things
Yeah.
will change in three years as well.
Yeah. No, 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 definitely. So yeah, definitely a great next step. I would certainly recommend, even if you think you have a great understanding of, where you're going with this funding request, what's required of you, I would still definitely schedule a one-on-one. It's always good to just, meet with the folks that are potentially funding your project, get to know them a little better. They might have questions that you weren't thinking of. So I'd strongly recommend doing that. Like I said, I'm always happy to meet with you too, just on, grant writing strategy and things like that, or answer any questions that may not be directly related to this funding request. And then, as I mentioned, supporting documents, um, even if they're not required, I would still certainly recommend attaching, maybe there's a different project that you did, or some really good data, or some report that you came out with, over the past couple of years. It never hurts to attach that as like an addendum to a project proposal. So definitely recommend doing that. And then be sure to, definitely submit. I would submit a few days before the deadline. That way, sometimes I've gone to apply for a grant and I've had everything done, but like the portal wasn't working or something like that day of, and you're like panicking trying to call people. So definitely try to, submit it well in advance. It's just helpful for everyone, especially on, Shahela's side of things. It's just good to get everything in before the deadline. So. With that, I will leave this last side. Like I said, feel free to call or, email me anytime. I love, hearing from folks who, are working on a certain project and have questions about, what's the best way to frame this or something like that. There is no such thing as a bad question. I am always available. So yeah,
Thank you so much, Connor. And of course, we'll be sharing the slides and resources with you. But before I pivot to like maybe the technical side of the application, does anyone have any questions for Connor?
I'm just looking at the chat now too. So
Okay, and we'll have a Q&A at the end as well. So I think we'll continue to go. And then if my team members can just keep an eye on the waiting room, and then I will share my screen. And let me know if you can see my screen. Is it coming through for people?
Yes, yeah.
Okay,
Yes.
all right. Oh, I'm just going to go over the guidance document that I provided to you. Again, a lot of folks couldn't make it to this call, so we'll definitely send you the recording and these slides and also all the supplemental things you'll need. But you should have had it as an attachment to your decision email. So just to kind of go over the rough timeline, full proposals, as Connor mentioned, are due on March 13th by 4 p.m. And then we have April, towards the April 2026, we'll have notification of awards. The grant review panel will be reviewing things between March 13th and within April. And hopefully we don't have any technical issues with the grant portal system. That's why it took a few more weeks to send out decisions this time around. I apologize for that. And then in May, June, we'll have our grant announcements, in-person grant announcements that everyone is welcome to. On June 25th is our annual learning exchange this year on Thursday at the Graduate Center. And so that's just a learning exchange for all our awardees, past, present, future, to just kind of come learn together and share resources. And then July 1st is the start of the project date. And then July 31st, 2028 is like the latest completion of the date. But of course, you may have projects with timelines that are earlier than that. And then August 31st, 2028 is final reporting. And so you'll notice within the full proposal guidance document, there are different sections. And so when you go on to the UNA portal, previously, if you've applied with us, we've been using Blackbaud. Now we had a shift in the system that we use. It's called UNA. You will have that link in your email box that you can click on, and it will take you to the full proposal portal. Highly recommend that you start ahead of time. I always get people who, at the last hour, who end up starting and they end up having like technical issues and things like that, just so we can support you better if you're running through any issues like that. If you've forgotten your password, please reach out to Andrea and she'll help you reset it. But pretty much you'll have the name of the organization, the role, and the contact information. You would have to re-enter that because it doesn't come through from your LOI. So I would just re-enter all that information, your employer identification number, your SAM registration, and then the UEI number. And then this is the time where you can kind of modify your requests. So based on the comments from the review team, maybe they've asked you to consider increasing the amount or decreasing the amount. This is the opportunity for you to kind of change the budget request and allocations. Um, and then also indicate if you need a working capital advance. So a working capital advance means that you need support to start off your program. You don't have the capital to do it. So it would just be an advance to you within the first 2 months of your program starting for you to be able to have that support. And then your organizational's annual budget. Also for the working capital advance, yep, so I mentioned that part. And then section 4, you would go up to your name, the project description. For the name of the project, I noticed a lot of folks just use their organization name. But if you have a particular name for your project, that would probably be better in identifying things. But you can use the name of your organization. It just gets a little bit tricky, especially if you have different grants open with us from the previous years. It's just nice to have like a unique name for your project. Um, and then the list of partner organizations with their description of roles. So any details you can give on that as well. The description of your project. There are word limits. They're not enforced in UNA because it doesn't allow us to do that. So I just would ask you to stay within the word limit. But if you went beyond 250, you'll notice that it'll still allow you to submit. Same thing with the project description. So you have the problem. This time you'll be able to select from a drop-down menu the LISCIF program priority. So you're picking at least one. The impact, alignment with the CCMP, stakeholders, work plan, outreach support, area of work, direct impact, project team. You'll notice this isn't too different from the LOI. You're just providing more detail, building upon it based on what the review team has recommended and maybe areas they wanted you to expand on. This is your opportunity to do so and some of that storytelling. You would also indicate if you need real estate controls or permissions. And if you need a quality assurance performance plan, and we do have a QUAP contractor, there's nothing wrong with needing one or requiring one, just to make sure everything is running smoothly. And so we do have a contractor who will kind of help you write that QUAP if your project gets identified to need one. And then for the budget table, I'm just going to stop screen share. This year it's a little bit different. In previous years, we have had Blackbaud where you attach a budget template. This year, the budget template has been built into Una. And I noticed during the LOI phase, a lot of people had some issues with that and just like understanding like how to put all the categories in. So I'm going to pivot to Andrea to kind of show us in real time what that looks like and areas you should be including. But for the full proposal, we do require a budget narrative. And so that'll be your opportunity to kind of explain a lot of the breakdown and the costs associated. So I will stop screen sharing and then turn it over to Andrea for, oh, sorry, Connor, did you have a question?
I did just real quick on the budget stuff, and this might be
Yeah.
addressed later too, but are so typically like I know there's a bunch of different organizations of different sizes, and I know something like working for a smaller organization like the one I'm on a board of, we struggle with like having a budget that feels big enough. And what we do is we can count like volunteer work and stuff as like in-kind contributions as part of the budget. I'm not sure if that's allowed or if you have restrictions against that, but I find it very helpful if you're a smaller organization and you might be panicking, thinking, "Oh, my budget's too small." You can count, volunteer work and things like that. Really be creative, and it'll
Yeah, when you
make it,
say that,
yeah.
do you mean your organizational budget or just like the
Organizational
request?
budget, yeah.
Oh
Yep.
yeah, I don't think
Yep.
that's like a huge issue for
Okay.
LISCIF. We actually prioritize smaller organizations for the
Perfect. Okay.
smaller organization budget. But I do know for like grants that have a match requirement, I think folks, they do end up strategizing and using that towards that. But for us, it's not an issue because there is no match requirement. You don't really have to indicate that. And I think for the organizational budget, the reason why we ask that is that when we have to make those hard decisions, if an organization has $500 million and maybe another organization has $4,500, and with LISCIF being a capacity building grant, that kind of helps me decide on who to prioritize with. And because
Hmm.
sometimes for some organizations, they're if they don't get LISCIF funding, they're okay, and there's other streams and other federal grants. But for some organizations, if they don't get LISCIF funding, it would be hard to find funding to fund certain projects. So kind of when we do our selections, kind of doing it in that sense. But yeah, that's a great tip, Connor. And we actually do have match training on February 5th because some of you guys have indicated that, you want to apply for the Futures Grant and all these other grants that do require a match. Like, how do you do that strategically? So definitely some support on that end. But thank you for that comment, Connor.
Yeah, no problem.
I'm just going to pivot to Andrea.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Shayla. So we are going to go over the budget entry. However, I wanted to reiterate some items that were on Shayla's slides. Can everyone see my screen okay? So when you're in the portal, just know that you can kind of work out of order, but you won't be able to submit unless all items are saved and marked as completed. So keep that in mind. I know sometimes multiple people work on the proposals, so just know that if you need to go ahead and complete the budget, you can, and then you can go back to the actual application details. One of the items to make sure and to remember is, as Shahela mentioned, you will have to re-enter your application information. It doesn't just pull in from the LOI phase. You will have to re-enter that information. Also, when you're on the application forms, make sure that each form, again, you are marking save and you're marking mark as complete and save and continue. If you get to the end and your submit button is grayed out and you feel like you've completed everything, if you return to this form, more than likely, if you see the status as in progress, that means you didn't mark as complete or you didn't save. So make sure if you're not able to submit that you review each section to ensure that it is marked as complete so that you can then submit. So moving to the budget, we do provide a budget template. I know a lot of people do like to work outside the system and then sort of copy and paste, which is good. However, make sure that you are entering in each line item in each category. So as you're entering in, and we'll start with personnel. As we're entering in, we would go to our budget and click on our plus sign to create the line item. And so if you have 5 staff members that are going under personnel, you're just going to go back to that plus sign each time and enter each line item. You want to make sure that one, everyone that is mentioned in your work plan, your proposal, you've highlighted their role in the line item budget as well as the budget narrative. So this is where you would enter in each line item category. So I will just walk through it and you will enter in that direct cost. On your line item budget, you're not going to do the calculation. However, on in the narrative, we ask that you make sure that you are showing the hours or the percentage that that person is working on your LISCIF award. Make sure that that is spelled out. So for our direct costs, I'll enter in the total salary that will be paid. And here in the narrative is where I would say our employee tester will spend 20 hours um, on the program at $20 an hour. And I know you guys will be way more thorough, but just giving an example, which will total up to my direct cost. And so you will just hit create, and that will create each line item. And again, you want to make sure that is done in each category. You're going to have the line item description as well as the budget narrative that supports each line item. Once that is complete, you'll notice that when you get down to your budget, your overall budget cost, it will need to align with what you requested. If it doesn't match with your total request from the beginning, again, you will not be able to submit. And it will show you if it's out of balance. And so let me go back to try and kind of give you an example. Let me go back. So I am going to request the max amount of 100,000. I'm going to mark as complete and I'm going to save and continue. And so now I'll go to my budget and you'll see that although I requested 100,000, what I've entered in my line item categories is only $100, so I'm out of balance. So it kind of double checks your work to make sure that the amount you requested is what is reflected in your budget. And so some assurance in that is you will not be able to submit unless it matches. So I know during the letter of intent phase, there were some who did have issues regarding that. So please keep that in mind that if you're not able to submit and you've went to every other section and they are marked as complete, look at your budget to make sure that it matches what your overall request is.
Andrea, we have a question in the
Yes.
chat from
Oh, okay.
Nina who asked, this is included under non-personnel?
I guess I don't
I'm sorry, when
understand.
you were in the personnel
Mhm.
section, you listed item type non-personnel when you were doing your example. So,
Yes. So
okay.
thank you for that question. Yes. So the options you'll see here is item type, and you'll see non-personnel and direct cost calculation. What that does is if you select direct cost calculation, that's when you'll have to do the breakdown of the cost. And you're already doing that in your narrative. And so this it makes it simpler on the line item if you're choosing the non-personnel selection and just entering in the total direct cost and then showing the actual work, the cost breakdown in your narrative section. If you choose to show it both ways, you can feel free. It takes a little bit more time, and again, you're already doing the same thing in your narrative, and so it's just easier to select the item type as your non-personnel. We understand it's kind of confusing because we know this is personnel, but this is more related to how you're going to break down the cost, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, now I'm curious about the narrative. So in the narrative, we should say how many hours and the base rate and all of that information for every single person working on the
Yes.
project. Okay.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Thank you for that question.
We have another question from Ava. Under direct costs, you were putting the amount budgeted from the grant to this person, correct?
Correct. Yes. So for example, for my personnel, I know a lot of times people have, maybe they're paying for one or two staff members and you have more volunteers that are maybe stipend based. So you would put the total amount that you're charging to the LISCIF program for that salary, you would put that under your direct cost. And then in the narrative, this is where you complete the breakdown. There a word limit for the narrative? There is not a word limit for the narrative which within each line item. It is not character constraint or word constraints there. Do we have any more questions in the chat?
I think I can pivot to the next section and
Okay.
then we still have
Just to
time. Oh, go
Okay,
ahead.
just to wrap
Sorry.
it, feel free, if you guys have any questions regarding the budget as you're working through it, or if you even want to hop on a call, feel free to reach out to me. I know that with the new system, and I know sometimes everyone isn't, necessarily specialized on the finance section. So I feel free to reach out and I can walk you through that. If you want to, again, if you want to do the cost breakdown in that section, we can do that as well. Just make sure you're doing what's easier for you, um, and really focusing on making sure that your budget aligns with your work plan. And I think there was one more question, and I know
Just to,
we'll come back to questions at the end.
yeah,
Oh, we can take it. Sorry. I can pause.
I not
I
to,
think the next
yeah.
question was, is if everyone is a contractor, is it still personnel? No, contractors are not considered personnel. Personnel are the people that you have on staff, W-2 workers that you're paying on staff. Contractors will go under the contractual category. And what else should be in the narrative box? It's important to highlight, yes, the person's role, how they contribute to the project, so that we can tie that back to the work plan. And also, again, the hours that they are spending on the project and what will be charged to the project. And I think that's all the questions we have for now.
Yeah, and we have some more time to kind of go over questions after this little section as well. So some of the other requirements for uploads are your maps and just being very specific of where your project is. But also if it's too zoomed in, it's hard to kind of see the proximity to Long Island Sound. So just to kind of make sure like where it is in relation to that, some of the reviewers are based in New York, some are in Connecticut. It just kind of helps in those terms. But also a lot of folks like they end up just doing like a screenshot from all of Canada to New York, like of the overall watershed. So being too vague doesn't help. So, kind of circling or showing where your project is exactly really helps with that. And then letters of commitment as well. Different from letters of support because letters of support, you can kind of generate hundreds of letters of support for everyone who's supportive of your work. But letters of commitment are more so for any partners you have written in, any people in your project that have to have deliverables. So really just showing commitment from them and on their end. And then the project impact model, which I'll get into shortly. Any real estate control and permissions, this is the area where you'd upload those kind of documents. And any other optional attachments. So some folks like to add images and things like that. So anything else that you'd like to for reviewers to see. But it's not a requirement. It's optional for that end. And then just wanted to kind of share our website where we have other resources. We'll have the full proposal guidance document there soon, the comprehensive conservation management plan, and there is a new one for the next few years. It just came out in June. So I would recommend that if you are showing alignment, that you are using the newest document and not the old document from 2024. Um, and then also just matching the CCMP actions, right? So you're not using the old document, you're using 2025 and on. And then for the project impact model and actions, you have a few templates and examples there on our website as well. You also have the full proposal scoring and evaluation rubric. If you're curious of how reviewers will be grading your proposal or scoring your proposal, there is a template that you can see on that. You have to have a minimum of 70 points to be able to be considered for funding, and it goes up to 100. So each of your sections is scored differently within different points. The LISCIF Excel budget template, again, there's no budget requirement for documentations up on the portal, but this is just for you to kind of have a working space. You can download it and use it as a space as a rough draft of like what your budget looks like before you put it to submission on UNO. So for the project impact model, it just helps the review team. It helps EPA and Ray understand how your project aligns to the Long Island Sound Partnership, the CCMP, the estuary. And so having a project impact model kind of shows us that thinking. So this is an example for rainwater garden swales. And so this would be falling under the priority of projects that result in quantifiable pollutant prevention or reduction. So you're kind of identifying on the second one, the second box, like what is the LISCIF priority you are addressing. And then the third one, the CCMP funding theme, again, there's four. So just making sure that you're choosing, is it clean waters and healthy watersheds? And then what is the impact that your project plans to have? So this redirects excess rainwater to garden spaces, reducing stormwater runoff, and removing pollutants from the sound. And then the action that it's closely aligned to in the CCMP. So in this case, it would be clean and healthy watersheds 2-2, implement nature-based solutions and other practices that improve and maintain water quality and ecosystem health. So the alignment with the CCMP is extremely important because all of the Long Island Sound Community Impact Fund program gets the funding from the partnership. So everything would have to be in alignment. Even if you are located in upper parts of the watershed, there has to be some connection to the waterways, the rivers. We did have a lot of really cool urban agricultural proposals. So just making sure there's definitely a connection to everything that you're doing. Um, This is another under another funding theme, thriving and abundant wildlife. So this is an example of shellfish aquaculture and restoration, projects that foster a diverse, balanced, and abundant populations of fish, birds, and wildlife would be the LISCIF funding priority. And then the impact would be increasing these populations of oysters, clams, and scallops. And that would meet the action of THAW 1-1, right, from the CCMP. Similarly, you might have a proposal on community resilience preparedness. So that would most likely match with projects that enhance community resilience and sustainability, falling under the Sustainable and Resilient Communities theme. The impact would be creating community decision-making opportunities for resilience preparedness through training programs. And this would match SRC 1-1. Develop, deliver, and facilitate training programs relevant and responsive to community needs that assist with sustainability and resilience. And you'll notice with the CCMP actions as well, a lot of them have been summarized and reduced. The previous ones we had several hundred, so now it's a lot more reduced in that end. And you would only just need to select one at minimum. You can have more than one, but for reporting purposes, I would just ask you to select one that you feel is the most comprehensive, that kind of aligns with your project. Communicating water quality reports and findings. And so this would fall under the theme of informed and engaged public, right? With the LISCIF funding priority focusing on data management and integration projects. The impact would be effectively communicate water quality findings using environmental indicators and reports to educate diverse communities on the health of the Long Island Sound watershed. And then that would match IEP 2-4, support efforts to assess the public's understanding of Long Island Sound and its watershed. So that could mean like with translations in multiple languages and things like that. So for the requirements, what you would be uploading, and you could easily do this also on just like PowerPoint or an easy editing document. And we also will share with you the template for this. But basically, you're just uploading any one of these project impact models just so the review team has a better understanding of your alignment. And
One
then,
question on
oh,
that.
yes, sure. Yeah, of course.
I mean, if your project touches multiple priorities and themes, is that something that belongs in the narrative? And then within this template, you would just prioritize one. And then secondly, is there like a distribution planned for how many, like grants you're going to fund across these themes? Is it equally distributed?
That's a great question. So we try to be equally distributed across the four themes, but for reporting purposes, because even for LISCIF, when I report to EPA, I'm only allowed to choose one action from the CCMP that's most comprehensive from all the different activities that I'm doing. So yes, you can have multiple indicated here, you can have multiple in the narrative. But when you do that final reporting, or you do that semi-annual reporting with us, it's important that you just try to choose one. And the reason I say that is because the system that EPA uses to track the metrics, it can only identify, it's kind of like an Excel sheet where it only identifies like one of the themes coming across. It wouldn't be able to recognize several. So that's why they advise us just to use one comprehensive one. And then similarly for our awardees and everyone else, that kind of follows suit as well. So I hope that answers your question.
It does. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. And I think when we get to that point as well, we can definitely set up, one-on-one time if you guys have any additional questions on that for reporting and things like that. Um, And then I just wanted to share, we do have a match training on February 5th at 1 p.m. If you go on our website, you can sign up for those. And then we do have a New York Learning Exchange planned for the Queens Museum on February 12th. That's coming up. Some of you guys are going to be panelists who are on this call, which I'm really excited to work with. And then for the Connecticut Learning Exchange, that's at the Mashantucket Pequot Museum and Research Center in Connecticut on February 24th, which some of you are also on this call, being panelists, which I'm excited about. And then we also have our third annual learning exchange happening on June 25th at the Graduate Center. And this is just like a nice way to touch base with everyone in person regionally from Connecticut and New York, people who have, been awarded with us previously and in the future, and just like some learning opportunities there as well. And then there's also my Calendly link to schedule 30-minute technical support calls, but you can also just email me or call me as well. And then we also have our email addresses associated for any support that you might need. I am the program director. Andrea Polly is the grants administrator, and she can help support you with any budget questions you have, or if you're having any issues on the portal, someone on your team needs a password reset. And then Kelly Marty is here as a program associate, and she's also able to help you with anything that you might need. So I'll just stop screen share so I can see everyone and see if we have any additional
We
questions.
have, yeah, someone in the Ava in the chat just asked, thanks for the great webinar. What grants is the match training relevant to?
Yeah, so it's so actually someone from this call was like, Shahela, it would be really helpful as a small organization to have a training that we know LISCIF doesn't ask for a match, but a training that helps us understand how to strategize for a match for bigger grants. And so it's not particularly to any specific grant, but for example, if you are applying for the Futures grant or my colleague Suzanne who runs the National Estuaries Program grant, that requires a match. If you're a smaller organization, it can feel intimidating and like how you do that. And kind of Connor also touched base on that. So that trainer, Melba, who's from Houston, Texas, really supports organizations financially and how to do that and strategize. So she'll be kind of going over just helpful advice and take questions from you guys as well for that. So it's not specific for LISCIF, but maybe like for any future capacity building grants that you're kind of considering or bigger federal grants. It's just good to kind of know how to do that. But yeah, any other questions about the full proposal or any other support that folks might need?
We aren't registered in SAM yet. I don't know if there's any guidance on support on how to do that, but that would be super helpful.
Yeah, I can definitely look into that. We used to partner with WeAct, and they were really helpful on that. But I think since the executive orders, and I think they had a huge cut on their Tic Tacs, I don't know if they were able to support those services, but I will follow up on that. And if you can just send Nina, Andrea, and myself just a reminder that you need support on that, and then we can just follow up with you on what would be the best resource. But it's good that you're getting started out. That's actually a great question. So if you need to like renew your SAM registration or start it, do it now, because once like it takes a while with the government and just getting support from them. So once you start it now, if you have everything going, once you get awarded by July 1st, everything is kind of working and we can deposit funds and kind of transfer those. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend like holding off on any of that because it does take a while. Uh, any other questions or I guess yeah, I think I was like asked to say this by the review team. If there are any applicants that are reapplying with us, I think one thing that can make your full proposal stronger is just leveraging on the impact of your previous grant, how that went, how it's going. I feel like any reference to that makes your proposal stronger. The review team does like to see like, oh, they got defended in so and so years. What was the impact of that? What was the lessons learned? What were the results? So that's always kind of helpful to kind of take from that, from your previous grants, if you had LISCIF previous grants. Yeah, and I think like the proposals that did do that came out very strongly because they were able to say like we had X amount of students and we had, X amount of engagement opportunities. We realized that this didn't work, but we're going to pivot this way. It's not always successes, it's always like things that you learn as well. So it's okay to kind of mention that and just I think it definitely makes your proposal much stronger than to like not mention it. So, um yeah, and then if there's no other further questions, we will get all this out to you this afternoon. And you do have our contact information, so please feel free to get in touch as you're working through the full proposal and if you have any questions. And I think Kelly has her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to add, if you all can fill out the survey, or
Oh,
if yeah,
yes.
if anyone wants to fill out the survey just to let us know how we did today, that would be very helpful. So I just sent it in the chat, and I'll also send it in the email as well for after this meeting.
And it's also an opportunity for us to build out more trainings, like, for example, the match training or anything that you feel like there's a gap in resources that we can help provide support with you. But thank you so much to Connor, Andrea, and Kelly, and thank you guys for spending this morning with us. And sorry about sending those decisions and link out so late. We had some issues with the grant portal that we're hoping to kind of get it more smoother. So I appreciate your patience. Thank you and have a good
Thank you,
Thank
afternoon,
you
everyone.
everyone.
all. Have a great day.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, thank you.